And welcome to another episode of What Teachers Have to Say. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Jake. And today we are unpacking something that's really exciting to me and brand new to me.
It is. It's a framework for understanding something that teachers all deal with. Laziness. Procrastination, not turning in work. Why aren't they turning in the work?
I'm really excited about this. So the big topic of procrastination. So before we get into it, as always, just a disclaimer that the work we do on What Teachers Have to Say is passionate to us and also not connected to our other professional life or the schools that we work with.
It's just meant to open a discourse, conversation around issues in education, and bring new information into education from other disciplines that could be really
to advance
helpful.
our field that we care deeply about.
This is all grounded in current research in behavioral psychology relating to why procrastination happens and how we can use it for good.
And teasing it into different formats.
Yeah,
I'm super excited.
Avoidance.
All right, off we go.
Procrastination. Similar to like the trust kind of conversation, like these things are more complicated than we give them credit. We only kind of intuitively know when things are wrong or when things are going sideways, but we don't really have a name. We haven't put a name on it. So that's what we are doing.
Well, and it's really frustrating, like social media, the quagmire of the Facebook, right? So I'm in a lot of teacher groups. Some of them I unfollow frequently. And I'm gonna get myself canceled. How often do we see a frustrated teacher that is legitimately frustrated, hurting, right?
That
and
comes
they
from somewhere.
say kids are lazy. They
Students
don't want to
are
work
lazy.
anymore.
Yeah, it's the same narrative that we hear in a lot of places, but it's almost like trickle down culture. In a way, and then it's in the classroom. And so it's like, okay, students are lazy? Like, what does that
get canceled.
What does that mean?
Keep listening.
my
Don't turn us off yet.
my my hackles always kind of go up whenever I hear teachers really bad mouthing their students. Like that. It's one thing.
And there are legitimately bad experiences that students put you through.
Absolutely. No.
Like that's different.
Like you can be tortured by teenagers. That is
seriously.
Real. But,
I mean, I've been a first grade teacher. I have been past tense a first grade teacher. But there's no there's no ownership in that. No, I had to own the fact that a lot of the bad behavior in my first grade classroom was my lack of understanding of how to be a first grade teacher.
Right. And I feel like all these things kind of fall under the heading of classroom management. But really that's like
and this isn't blame the teacher time.
No, it definitely isn't that because everyone in this system is hurting. Let's just say that. Like let's just be real about that. That the way the system works for teachers and for students and for parents and families. Like it really is not doing what we're wanting it to do, but we're not getting to the bottom of the problem. Or just saying, it's easier to point fingers at people, right? It's always easier to have a scapegoat. And who has less voice and less power than kids?
Right? It's very easy.
So saying you're lazy.
And they're pushing back right now.
They're definitely
they're lazy.
pushing back.
So
there's all kinds of articles
about
coming
the topic.
Okay, so let's get into
the truth
that.
is, I am so excited about this, and there is a worry or a fear inside of me that it won't land. Procrastination.
It's such
this is really interesting. We've said that too many times, but a couple of weeks ago, you were listening to a podcast, the Huberman Lab. I cannot suggest it highly enough.
Lab
it is wonderful,
really interesting.
Very, very interesting science.
You turned me on to Huberman Lab.
Oh, did I?
Originally,
very interesting stuff. And he had a guest on named Dr. Adam Grant.
Right.
About procrastination.
Behavioral psychologist.
Yeah. But that really Whew.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
So yeah, if you want to, like, it actually might be worthwhile. It's a commitment. It's a time commitment.
It's like 3.5 hours. We've listened to it twice now.
But if you want to like start to understand the framework in more depth after you listen to this episode, I would highly recommend listening to Dr. Adam Grant speak about his work. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
and I'm also like reading his book.
I want to put this out there really early. We're going to talk about that procrastination isn't one thing.
It's not one thing.
And only one of them is actual laziness. That does exist out there.
Sure.
It's fine. I'm so excited to put this into practice with students, which we're gonna talk about how to do that at the end.
Yes. End of the episode.
And one of them is going to become a whole other podcast episode.
Because it's too deep. Honestly,
this is putting a framework around something that I have really been bothered by.
Yeah.
I don't believe that students are lazy. I have a really inherent belief that human beings enjoy learning and are curious.
Yeah, that is
until they are stopped from it.
Everything in our biology is moving us toward curiosity.
Somebody tasted a lobster for the first time. That took curiosity.
It definitely did. I mean,
oh, what's this
that
pinchy
does not
thing?
Look appetizing. This is a big sea spider, but yeah, we are curious creatures, and we need to acknowledge that and acknowledge that there is so much potential held within students.
Yeah.
And we need to learn how to empower them better, and this is a part of that.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about that. So let's get into it. So essentially, we have uncovered through the work of Dr. Adam Grant and others, thanks ChatGPT, GPT that stuff.
Yep. It's a good way to
It's such a powerful tool to help bridge my lack of understanding in things and my curiosity. I play with it. So we've kind of uncovered, we've been introduced to 7 different forms of procrastination.
7.
And we're going to talk
about
the 7
circles of hell.
Circles of hell. So let's just hit the very first one.
Yes.
They talk about classic procrastination.
Classic.
Which truly is just lack of interest. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to play Fortnite. I wanted to read my book.
Don't want to do it.
It was laziness.
Don't want to do it.
And that's okay. That is a form of procrastination. But I think that we often just say like, that's procrastination.
Totally.
That's it right there.
Yep.
The opposite of the Protestant work ethic is procrastination.
Bad. And it's demonized.
But the research is saying it's only 1/7. And there's probably other forms, but of the framework that we looked at, 1/7 is classic lack of interest.
And even that's going to come from somewhere.
Absolutely.
It's probably going to come from a lack of understanding or access. Like if you can't access material, if there isn't a scaffold there for you.
Like we talked about, like when I'm burnt out.
That too.
I am choosing to just not.
I don't have it in me to do that.
Which could be read as laziness. I just want to sit on the couch and binge watch a show.
Yep.
And that is procrastination. And putting off the dishes and the laundry and all those other things because I just don't want to do it right now.
Right. And I just see that as working on a different thing.
Right.
Like if you reframe it that way, and that's what the other categories start to do. So you have your classic procrastination, and that is kind of amorphous. Like that could be tied to any other sort of life-related things. But there are other versions that are a little more structural, that are connected to the ways in which we are teaching.
And I think reframing those is where I see the potential for a really powerful framework, which is why I'm really excited about today.
Totally.
So classic procrastination, we understand that. It's become what we think everything else is.
Right.
But then the second form they call anxious procrastination, which they term as the avoidance of fear or perfectionism. This is the I don't want to start it because I won't do it to the level that I feel like I want to or should. Or I'm generally afraid of what might happen if I do something.
Yeah, anxious.
Yeah.
I have a genuine fear around beginning a task, doing a task, completing a task, and that might be tied to perfectionism. I've definitely done this in my life. Like I have a certain level of perfectionism around things, and so I I don't have it. I'm not at that level yet, so I'm not going to attempt that. I'm not even going to start until I get there. That's another kind of procrastination that we'll get into. But
Well, what struck me about this is that I mean, I often see procrastination as a passive something. You're just not doing.
Just
right?
not.
But anxious procrastination is in fact active.
An active
You're
choice.
saying like, I'm going to choose to not do this because I'm afraid of the potential outcome, whatever that may be. So I had a student that through this student's disability, that's what this was. And now I know the name of it. And I thought it was so weird that like the SPED team was like, well, let's just start with turning in a blank piece of paper with this student's name on it.
Right. That's step one.
Step one. I was like, what?
So
I was a pretty new teacher at the time. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll try it.
So that would be actually another thing Dr. Adam Grant gets into, which is exposure therapy and flooding. So that's like when you have a phobia, right? The exposure therapy part is like if you're afraid of spiders, then there might be a spider in a jar all the way across the room, right? And then you're slowly getting more and more used to that stimuli in your environment. And then flooding is fully diving in and you pick up a spider or whatever. Yeah. But like there are stages to that in terms of psychology. And so this is probably that, like that they were going
and it worked.
It worked.
It worked. But I love the idea that that's not lazy.
No, it comes from a place.
Right. And it's very close to the next one, the avoidant procrastination, meaning like I recognize that there is a negative emotion or a negative outcome that I am going to avoid. It hurts me to do it.
Right.
I feel bad. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like a less of a person.
It makes me feel bad about myself.
So I'm active. I'm actively avoiding work, which is yet another form of procrastination. It's not lazy.
Yeah, it's coming from a place of pain.
It's still not positive.
So that's
right, and it's not a good outcome for a student.
No, it's never gonna work
something
for
about
you.
naming these, which we'll talk about, like being able to delineate. It's not lazy.
Right. So principles of psychology.
Something else.
Name it to tame it. Right.
Yeah, we're gonna get into.
We'll get to that. But yeah, it's that idea of being able to use some like psychological frameworks to start to understand these things in a little more depth, because it just doesn't make sense. Like that, I don't believe that people do things without having a reason. Like I'm gonna give that generosity no matter what.
You got to go back to a previous episode on trust.
Yeah. So the trust framework from Brene Brown is like if you paired that with this research,
which we're going to talk about in the end.
Yeah, for sure. So we're headed there.
How to put it into practice.
What's the next one, Jay?
Yeah, I know.
There are a lot. There's seven circles of hell we got to get through.
These are good. So we've had, just to recap, classic, which is lazy, lack of interest.
I can't do it.
I'm not going to.
And I'm not interested in doing it.
Anxious, which is actively avoiding the fear around it or the perfectionism.
That comes into play.
And then avoidant, which is putting things off because you have a negative emotion or an outcome around it.
Right. Like so it's going
to hurt.
It's an emotional problem.
Yeah.
Is procrastination is what it is. It doesn't come from motivation necessarily.
Then one that I guess I didn't think about in terms of procrastination, but they categorize it as indecisive procrastination, meaning I don't have the ability to make a decision around this right now.
Right.
Like it's too much. I'm afraid. I'm paralyzed by decision fatigue, or there's too many choices. You know,
I don't know where to start.
What's where do I even begin? It's almost like you're choosing the power of not because you don't know where to start.
Right.
And I think that's a really powerful place.
Ties into that a little bit too.
Yeah, that's
like, I don't know if I choose one thing.
The reason I'm so excited about these is because like when you start to see a scaffold of behavior, it's not emotional to me as a teacher anymore.
Right.
It's not you're somehow lacking, you're lazy, you're just not wanting to. I can be like, oh, okay, like this is how you're avoiding it. So let's work on it.
Right.
Like, there's a power in it.
Right.
We'll
because
talk about
if you
in the end.
if you go to a student and you're like, you're lazy,
you suck.
That's the end of the conversation.
It's over.
That's the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Like you can't move forward from there. Yeah. You've made a very negative comment about a student related to their identity and have piled on emotional distress related to something they're already struggling with.
Yeah.
Like coming at a student that way is never going to get you where you want to go.
No. Which then brings us to a personal one. The procrastination of distraction. Distracted procrastination.
Yes.
This one hits really close to home, right? Where like I had the intent of getting something done. I was actively trying to do something, but my attention kept getting pulled away from it.
Right.
And you had something glorious.
Oh, for sure. Like
welcome to teaching.
I think welcome to teaching pretty much as an ADHDer. Like I have always had some ADHD aspects and I just, never really looked more into it. It was like partners and my current girlfriend was like, you should really look into this.
Have you considered?
Because you have the whole hyper-focus thing. You do so many of these things. I was like, I don't know. I've never had really my attention fractured in that way. Like I don't get pulled in these different directions. Well, welcome to teaching. So like, oh my God.
If you haven't felt your attention fractured, you're not a teacher.
Yeah. There's a million different things pulling at your attention. And I think this is one that teachers will relate to strongly. It's just like your email, your grades, your role, there's so many different forms and they change all the time. And here's a new curriculum. And then the principal asks me to do this.
There's a behavior outburst. And then there's the process of putting your class back together, you have to fill out a form to take the kid to the office, and then they're going to come back and distract you again.
Yep. Yeah. Whew. There's so much there that last year I was actually really, really struggling to do my job, get the work done because I kept getting so fractured and so distracted by all things that were of equal importance. So that's the thing. There's no order of operations to teaching. There's no workflow that you can really, like you have to very strategically self-plan a workflow in order to combat this. And I didn't have that yet. So it was just like, oh, I got email. Oh, no, a parent. Oh, I need, I got to get, a lesson plan. Oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? Yeah. Like all of these things start to pile up on you. And then you didn't get the thing done that you actually needed to do.
Oh, and it piles up into other forms of procrastination now, right? You're like, oh, well, now I'm behind and I don't want to be behind anymore. So I'm just going to avoid it. And I'm stressed out and it hurts and I feel like a failure and like, oh.
Yeah.
But you're not lazy.
You're not lazy. You're not lazy.
Actually like hyper working.
Yeah.
Well, and that idea of procrastination because of distraction, like you don't have to have ADHD for that. Like,
no.
You just have to be a modern human.
Yeah. If you have a phone,
seriously, a distraction machine.
It's a distraction machine. And not like that's the thing. It's such a powerful tool that you have a world of information in front of you at all times.
Well, and it really got me thinking. There's a book that's really changed the way that I work. Called Deep Work.
Yeah, you were telling me about that book.
It was absolutely pivotal in writing my book.
Writing your book.
To go away and anyways. But I love that he references some work about, he calls it tethering of the consciousness. And so it's that idea that, and we're going to talk about the subconscious mind. So it's that idea that if I'm working on, say, grading a paper, and then a notification comes in that I got an email, and I change over to start working on answering the email, a percentage of my consciousness remains working, or subconsciousness remains working on grading.
Yeah.
Okay. And so now like a portion of it's over there, and now I'm working over here. And then a student walks in.
Right.
And a portion of it is working on grading, and a portion of it is answering the email. And now I'm working with a student.
Right.
And then a phone call comes in, and so we fracture our attention and our subconsciousness and our consciousness, and this tethering chips away at the bandwidth of our thinking power.
Your conscious power.
Yeah. And then, so we literally have like less firepower to focus when we refocus. Yeah. And there's a process that the brain has to go through. Andrew Huberman, if you're listening, please help me with this one. There's a process that the brain goes through to pull those back in, but it takes time. Yep. And so they talk about getting back into a flow state takes like 15, 20 minutes to get, and what it is it's retracting those tentacles back into, now I'm only doing this one thing. Right. And so when I think about that in terms of this, like ADHD is one thing. Yeah. It's like you're more likely to, shiny squirrel. Like we live this life.
Right.
But
we didn't choose this life. This life chose us.
But the idea that like it's not laziness, it is biological and chemical, or if you can put cognition into those, whatever that is.
What Huberman calls it is like neural energy. That's like his term. And he's kind of, it always comes up in the conversation.
But like in the form of distracted procrastination, like I didn't get it done. I did procrastinate because I didn't have the firepower. And sometimes that mounts up into like, now I'm going to avoid it.
Yep. Now I'm stressed.
Now I'm stressed out.
It's a different kind of procrastination.
I don't like it. I'm not going to do it right anyways. So I'm going to just not do that right now.
So now it's anxious.
So I'm working on editing the book right now.
Yeah.
I'm almost done. In fact, I'm all but finished.
Yes.
And I definitely hit a point yesterday. I worked for like 6 hours straight.
Whoa.
Thank you, deep work.
Hyper-focus.
I know, right? Thank you. I'm learning to leverage these things.
Yeah, it's a superpower.
And there came a point where I was making easy decisions to do something in an easy fashion, not in a really right fashion.
Change that one word.
Yeah, like it's good enough.
Yeah,
right.
Good enough. Sure.
And so I actively decided, like, I'm going to put this away right now. I'm going to do it at a later time because I don't have the bandwidth to do it anymore. Right. Which is an act of procrastinating.
It's a thing. And it's also recognizing your limits.
Yeah. But I love that you said, like, culturally, in at least our experience of Western culture, when you say procrastination, there is not a positive connotation.
No, it's negative every time.
Only negative.
It's almost tied to laziness. And so it's like laziness and procrastination are basically the same thing. It's just it's just coded as some kind of weakness and avoidance. Yeah. And then, that goes against the Protestant work ethic. You can't have that.
Giving back to society.
Yeah.
You're wasting your time. You're wasting my time.
Exactly. So we see these things not as actually active work because they're not fully visible, right?
There's no product.
When we come to the understanding of a subconscious mind, which is a real thing in psychology and in like behavioral psychology, this is a thing that we don't know enough about it.
No,
it's a very amorphous concept, but the the research shows that yes, you do need to have some time where your brain organizes information, whether that's while you're asleep, whether that's while you were focusing on something else and letting it ruminate.
Right, which I love. So that's the last form, which I would have never classified as a form of procrastination, but now I see it.
Yeah.
Right. So the literature calls it active procrastination.
Active procrastination.
Yeah. Meaning that you delay the start of a task, but you use that time to think and plan and kind of ruminate on the topic in the background.
Right.
And so back to the idea of tethering, right? So this is when like, maybe you're in a conversation and you're trying to think about something and then you go off to do the dishes.
Okay.
And like 5 minutes later, you're like, oh, now I remember what it is. It's because you're tethered to that still and your subconscious mind is working on it. And that's when it brings it up and you're like, oh, that's what it is. But I love that active procrastination is like, I'm going to open up the idea. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to figure out a little bit like, what is it that I need to do?
What is it?
Now I'm going to put it to bed and I'm going to chew on it, whether actively or passively. And it was so like, oh, we do this, right? This is how we plan episodes of the podcast.
This is the whole thing.
3 or 4 weeks ago, you said, I listened to this episode. It was super interesting. You should totally do this.
Yep.
A week later, I started listening to it. You're now listening to it for a second time and reading the book. We chatted, we texted about it a few times.
Yep, over Christmas break.
And we just kind of chewed on it slowly until today we said, okay, like let's get together and film an episode. Went to lunch, chatted, built the background, and now I understand the topic so much better than had I cram sessioned and then like filmed.
Yeah. Then we would have known all of the terminology, but we would not have been able to really apply it to our lives. I mean, there are these deeper connections that happen when you let something sit, when you let it work on you, when you let yourself work on it, but not actively. It's hard to describe, but I feel like it's a common experience.
Well, and we kind of glossed over, there was a term that was totally new to me that we kind of linked in the avoidance category called procrastination.
Procrastination.
I'm like, that's a real thing?
Yeah. That's
procrastination.
Yeah, that's what,
in fact, Adam Grant labels himself as a procrastinator. Meaning the second that he gets a task, he feels the need to do that task right then.
Right.
And so we know these students, right? They're the ones that like leave class and go home and immediately start writing the essay.
Yep.
Which is rewarded in public education.
Very much so.
But the literature says not in adult life.
No.
Because it's superficial.
It is.
There's no time to chew on it and think about it and move creatively into something new. Oh, it's fascinating to think about that.
Fascinating. And so Grant's research that he was talking about in that podcast, it's so interesting, is that basically in terms of outcomes, the classic procrastinator and the precrastinator end up doing the same
They end up doing the same work.
Basically, because
the garbage done in the last hour, or the garbage because you didn't take time
to ruminate, make other connections, or think creatively or laterally.
Surface level, played on your strengths.
They're like, okay, I have an idea and I'm going to go with that idea.
Which there's a time and place for that.
There totally is.
Yeah.
Like not every task needs all of your attention or creative, prowess, but at the same time, if those two things look the same in like real work life, and that's what they were studying was like real actual adults.
The end product.
What happens? And it's like, oh, well, the person that puts it off to the end, they go with the first idea because that's all you can do. And then the person that starts it straight away, they only start with one idea. They don't end up coming up with other ideas. And it was actually, I think it was like it was a student he was mentoring that like gave him this like kind of epiphany where she reflected to him that like, oh, I come up with my best ideas when I'm procrastinating. And he was like,
no way.
What? What does that even mean? And then they started studying it. And that's what they found is that specific active procrastination of at least understanding the framework of a task. Like you have to open it up. You have to take a look. But then you close it back up and then you let your mind work on it. And you start to try to think creatively about it. And you start to think laterally. And you make connections that you never would have made if you just went with that first idea.
And when we think of like the great thinkers of our era, they all went on walks.
Yeah.
Like it's surprising how many of them talk about like going for their morning constitutional, right? Like going for their little walk. Because that's what it is. They had a thought and they're like, oh, I'm going to go sit with it for a while. I'm going to go watch Walden Pond.
Yeah.
I'm going to go stare at the leaves of grass for a while.
Nice references, man.
Thanks.
I love it.
I really have never read Walden.
Teacher. Yeah. But just read Walking. Thoreau's essay Walking, I think everyone should read. It's still so relevant. And
it's so relevant.
There you go.
But here we go,
Walking. Right?
Like the ability, Johannes Kepler.
Oh yeah.
Another one, right? The blind astronomer. Like he did all of his greatest work, like the solar system and all of these things that it's still a valid science. Blind, sitting in a chair, just imagining it. That had to have looked like ultimate laziness.
Ultimate. Yeah,
oh,
it's like,
Mr.
what are you
Kepler,
doing?
he's just sleeping in his chair again.
I'm thinking. Like, what are you doing? Thinking.
Resting my eyes.
Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh. But how do we put this into practice? So, to be honest, I really want to do an entire episode on building active procrastination in a classroom. There's too much to do there.
There is. It's
but I
real
think
work.
It's really a good idea today to unpack those more negative sides of procrastination, those other 6, and how to tackle them. I love that you said name it to tame it. And I think that really works. Could you imagine working with a student? I'm excited to do this.
I'm going to do this.
I literally know the student in my head.
We're going back in 1 week.
This is going to happen.
And we're going.
Right? We know the one that says like, oh, this kid's lazy.
Yep.
They just don't. Kids these days don't want to get off my lawn. Right? Kids these days, they just don't want to work.
That's such
and so
lazy
I want to approach it from a different perspective because I've kind of been that guy. I want to approach it from a different perspective that says like name it. Be like, I'm imagining working with a student. Now, granted, we work with older students. This would be hard.
This is high school level
with other kids. But to say like, hey, like here's a list of some of these, scientifically backed ways of procrastinating. Does any of this resonate with you? Yeah. To name it, like. I often have a fear of perfection.
Same.
I think it's one reason why I am so passionate about language learning. Because I speak multiple languages, and I remember very clearly carrying a pad of notepaper around me, living in the Netherlands, and being like, okay, I have to go to the bank. What do I have to do? I have to do this. Well, I don't know those words. How am I going to do it? Oh my gosh, what if she asks me this? And there was an anxiety around it, like an actual anxiety. And I would just sit in the morning and procrastinate anxiously and actively like go through scenarios over and over and over. Like if they ask me this, how can I answer? Is there another way? What if there were times where I just wouldn't. I was like, I'm not going to the bank.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. Period.
Nope.
Not going to do that at all.
Nope. I can't handle
and
the
my
discomfort.
wife is nodding right now, like absolutely. Anytime I have to like return something to Costco or something like that, there's like a fear around it. For
really?
Me. Yeah, absolutely. Huh. It's like it's that anxiety of like, but what if they say no?
Oh,
I have to return this. Sure. It's broken.
There could be some emotional.
I'm going to put it off, and I put it off, and I put it off, and I put it off.
Yeah.
It's why didn't I go see my GP for like 15 years? Right. All of it. I procrastinate, but to name it, I'm imagining working with a student and alleviating that weird guilt of you're not lazy.
The shame.
That's the word for it. Removing shame from education. Yeah. Oh, if we just did that.
If we could do that.
To say, if a student could name that and be like, no, it's not that I don't want to. It's that I just feel really dumb when I start working on it.
Right. I don't have. There's no way for me to access this.
Yeah,
that's not what they would say, but that would be the meaning, right?
They'd be like, "I am failing to access."
Could you scaffold for me, good sir?
But I'm like, how powerful could that be to be like, "Hey, look, you look really stressed out. You haven't turned in your work. It's a new semester. Yeah. What is it that prevented you from doing that work? Because I don't believe that you're lazy. You're actually a really intelligent student. You work really hard in other classes.
Yeah.
What is it?" If you could get a student to the point where they're like, I'm afraid I won't do it well.
Yeah. Or I'll get a bad grade. I'll feel bad about it. I'll feel bad about myself. And then I avoid. And then I get distracted by things that I do enjoy. And then I'll work hard at those. Like I always like to bring up the fact that it's like, most kids today play video games in some scenario or other.
Yeah.
And games are not easy.
No.
Video games aren't easy.
You die a lot.
You die a lot. And they'll grind forever and learn all of these different patterns and different, like puzzles to get the thing that's rewarding and that it feels good. And the game teaches you how to play it.
Yeah.
A good game has to teach you how to play it. So if we are not teaching kids how to play school and just saying that they're lazy and that they're procrastinating, we're a broken game.
Right.
And that's how kids are going to react to it. It's just like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to
I'm just imagining getting them to name it and then recognize portions in their life of like, when is it that you do that?
Totally.
That's so empowering because then like the tame it, you called it tame it.
Yep.
Okay, like, can I help you build scaffold around this?
It's all psychology stuff.
Let's build supports, right? Like you and I have both been called disorganized.
Yeah.
And that hurt a lot.
It did.
Because it was a misreading.
Yeah. Like if you, if you ever saw the back end of me and Jake's workflow.
Oh my gosh.
It's so hyper organized.
We literally have
out
like
of control.
A phone with a timer, a phone with a monitor.
Color coordinated. I'll have
we're so organized.
I have to because I need those reminders
but it
for
looks
myself.
Very different.
But yeah.
And so I think that's the thing is like my organization might look, I mean, how else are you a full-time teacher and a consultant flying around the country and writing a book at the same time?
Yeah.
Like you got to be organized, right?
There's no way.
And so I'm still like a little angry about that.
I know.
But we confronted, we had a conversation. It was good.
Same.
I still respect this person greatly. Very greatly. Yeah. But how often do we call a kid lazy because we don't recognize what it actually is instead of saying like, hey, let me help you name this. Yeah. This is something that you're doing that's it's negative
it's
to you.
It's not going to serve you.
It's not going to serve you. Let me help you. And you know what? There are times where it's like, I'm just not into it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. Like,
and then it's like, all right, then
how can I help you motivate?
Yeah.
To recognize there are some things we just have to do.
So
like
that's
taxes.
the next piece. Like Adam Grant goes into motivation, and
we need Adam Grant on the podcast.
That's what we do.
Adam,
need to talk to him.
Give me a call.
Yeah, we got to talk to this guy because the applications for these things within education, it's so desperate.
I've never heard this in education.
Never. I've never ever heard procrastination defined in any
lazy,
way.
Nobody wants to work.
Yeah, it's laziness and video games and their phones.
If we just put their phone away, they'd be fine.
Dude, are you? That's not the issue. That is not the issue.
And like, there's modicums of truth in that.
Sure.
But I think
it feels true.
Feels true.
It certainly feels true.
I literally had a kid watching King of the Hill in class one time. I filmed him from behind and texted it to his mom. It was pretty amazing.
God, that's amazing. Oh, that's so good.
There was a reason why he was that disconnected.
Sure. Yeah.
And now to be able to be like, hey, what?
It might be something you did.
Absolutely.
The structure of what's happening is not engaging to him. But it's also, on his part too. Like there might be something there that we don't understand. Let's ask some questions. Let's figure it out. Let's go a little deeper and not make it about, oh, you suck. Like I said earlier, like once you do that, that conversation is over. There's nowhere to move forward once you have made some kind of value judgment and you're in a position of power over a student, like incredible power.
Absolutely.
So it's just like once you write them off, they know that, and that's the end of the conversation.
And Gen Alpha is not having any of it.
No, they're just like, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not participating. I want all of that. I want none of that.
Yeah.
And that's not going to serve them either. And we got to figure out how to.
We've talked about the inaction of Gen Alpha.
Totally.
Where they're like, I am not engaging in that. That is negative. You're just like, okay, but you have to engage in something.
Yeah.
We're getting off track.
I mean, I'm so excited by this topic that I'm just like.
Something liberating about delineating these things out. Teasing them out and be like, oh.
And it also takes the emotional labor from you as a teacher kind of out of the equation.
Yeah.
Like the same. All of these things, understanding the psychological frameworks and behavioral frameworks that we're working with when we're in the classroom, like the Josh Kirsten episode.
Oh, so good.
And then the trust episode. And now this. Like if we can break these things down, then we can figure out how to move forward.
Well, and like, the tag word build relationship, right? That's not a teacher shaming moment. It's I can only imagine that when I was called disorganized, had that person come to me in generosity and questioning and said,
from the trust
I see this thing.
Aspect,
what is it?
Yep.
To go to a student and be like, hey, you're not, dude, I had a student that didn't turn in anything for like a month, right?
That's
my class is not exactly disengaging.
No, it's not. You're always rolling game, crazy stuff. Some games going on, like, some experiment.
But to go to that student and I just wonder, like, what kind of a relationship would that build to say, like, hey, I see this pattern. Mm-hmm. Can you help me understand it? To me, it looks like a form of procrastination. These are these forms that I've been learning about.
Let me show you, yeah.
Do any of them look right to you?
Right. Hashtag it me on any of these.
It me.
Is it you?
Me.
It you me. Right here?
Yeah.
I've done all of these forms. I was like, oh yeah, I've done that. And definitely active. And I didn't even have the language for it or know that it was a thing, but that was a workflow that I discovered when I was in grad school, actually, or even undergrad a little bit. But that's when I like named it and was obstinate about it. Yeah. And basically, all my professors knew that if there was a deadline, I wasn't gonna hit it. Right. and as I was doing good work and building my rapport and reputation in that department, in English department, it was sort of just like, if I was in that class, it's like, okay, as long as you get it to me by the time I'm done giving feedback on the papers, then we're good. And it was like, okay,
a little UDL moment for you.
Because that was very sweet and kind, and I'm very thankful that I had such good mentors.
Well, and when you're in a master's program, there's room. It's not like having 35 kids in a classroom 6 times a day.
Yeah, exactly.
It's different.
Right.
Well, I'm looking forward to talking more about active procrastination. I think it's
because that's the goal.
Yeah.
If we can get you there.
We're going to talk about, we're already planning this, right? We're actively procrastinating, and we're not going to talk about it right now because we need to ruminate on it.
Yeah.
Because the interplay of building motivation and space for active procrastination in a classroom is new.
It's very new.
I think we've all done it on some point, but not purposefully. I'm excited. So we're going to talk a whole episode about that.
Motivation.
I'm really excited for that to come up. But so to recap, because we do need to close up. Mm-hmm. So types of procrastination.
Let's go.
And
again.
I'm going to count which ones are me. Oh, it's 7.
Yeah.
Classic. Meaning that's the classic one. That's you avoided it. It's lazy. Played Fortnite instead. Yeah. Anxious. You were afraid of the outcome or the perfection of it.
Right. The perfectionism comes in there and causes anxiety.
And then avoidant is purely emotional. There was a negative emotion tied to it.
Yeah.
And I think now negative. Sometimes we ask students to write narratively around what was a moment, and they're like, "I'm not writing anything."
Yeah, that's true.
I don't want to unpack that. Right. So a negative emotion or an outcome.
Yeah.
Or the grade. I don't feel like I'm in a good grade. I'm not good at this.
Yeah, I'm not good at this.
Which is a whole other.
And then that ties into growth mindset, but we'll get into that in the motivation part.
Indecisive procrastination, meaning I don't really know where to start. I don't know which one to choose.
Yep.
It's
sort of an overwhelm.
It's an overwhelm, and sometimes I think that unfortunately, in the world of UDL practices, we put this on students sometimes.
Sure.
Because choice is good, but sometimes too much choice or choice for the wrong student at the wrong time is bad.
Right.
I think we build procrastination on that level. And then we have distracted procrastination, which is I actively wanted to do something, but I kept getting pulled away from it.
Yeah, I seriously could not.
And then where creativity lies in active procrastination.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to
these. I looked at the thing. I let it stew. I let my unconscious mind work on it.
Yeah.
I always thought that's that's really important. That's where the ideas come from.
I love it. Huberman is it's not a hack. It's just how your brain works. You just didn't know it.
Pretty much.
Right?
That's what it ends that's leveraging the consensus.
Your brain leveraging how things work.
Because the studies they were looking at were actually meta-analyses. Yeah. So that means that you're looking at the studies of studies. So you have,
the one I looked at was 11,000 different research papers.
Yeah. It's just
on procrastination
massive amounts
from
of data.
1990 to 2020.
Yeah. That is supporting this understanding of procrastination.
And yet somehow I've been in education since the early 2000s and have never heard of this.
Not one time.
Always learning, but never coming to the fullness of the truth.
Yeah.
Isn't that somebody?
Somebody said that.
Somebody said it. All right.
All right.
If you're still listening, I hope we're not getting canceled for this.
Yeah. Stay tuned for the next one. And the kids aren't lazy.
The kids are not. Sometimes they are.
Sometimes they are.
But
for a reason.
But only 1/7 of the time. Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks for coming.